Note to the reader about that references to test the Lunar New Year appears in dozens of the interviews that follow. Tet is the most important holiday in the Vietnamese calendar and is often described as a sort of Thanksgiving, New Year, and birthday all rolled into one. Lasting up to a week or more, it is a time for families and friends to come together through parties, celebrations, and ceremonies often centered on the family at Central Village. About the place name. In 1976, Saigon, the former capital of the Republic of Vietnam, was merged with a surrounding province of Zadig and officially named Ho Chi Minh City. Today, both names are commonly used in Vietnam. In this book, I use Ho Chi Minh City to refer to the metropolitan area and Saigon to refer to the city historical core center in District 1. About prices. At the time we did the interviews, the exchange rate of the Vietnamese dong were hovering at just over 20,000 dong to $1 USD, which is the rate I will use to give a US dollar equivalent. It's also worth noting that inflation was upward to 10% per year, which means that even in the relatively short period we did the interview, there were a predictable change in price and salaries. About orthography, Vietnamese words are, that are commonly used in English, like Vietnam, Hanoi, Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City, have been written following English practice. On others use Vietnamese diacritics. As for personal names, others use English orthography and order for everyone from the United States and Standard Vietnamese for people living in Vietnam. Introduction. One of my favorite taxi rides in Vietnam took place in late 2008. Once the driver app had gone through the usual detail of it, family status and the like, I steered the conversation in the direction of work. How long he'd been driving a cab, working hours, income in an average month, the details that went to make up an ordinary day. The driver described how he had previously worked in a state-owned factory that had closed in the 1990s. After that, he'd gotten his license and drive a truck long distance before switching to taxis 5 years before. Driving a taxi was stressful and the salary low, but combined with his wife's income, it gave him and his family a lifestyle that would have been unimaginable that he'd worked for the state-owned factory. You know, he said, the economic development Vietnam has seen since 19, 1986 is thanks to the free market, thanks to competition, thanks to consumers being free to choose from a range of products. If Vietnam is going to keep on developing, this country needs to have a free market in politics, not just economic. His eyes, framed in a rearview mirror, sought out my own. Do you understand what I mean? he asked deliberately. Yes, I replied. I understand what you mean. There, these are many reasons I like this conversation. It shows how even the most mundane conversation can reflect the sweep of Vietnam's recent history. Đổi mới, market-oriented reform began in the early 1980s and painful economic restructuring, followed by the new opportunities, growth, and real improvement, improvement in material welfare. It illustrates the nature of Marxist Leninism, where the Vietnamese Communist Party has given up much of its control over the economy while still retaining its monopoly and political power, and it hints at the increasing willingness of originally Vietnamese to criticize the party and its policies. A rising inflation and economic slowdown after 2008 eroded much of its claim to legitimacy. All of this from a few questions about how someone came to drive a taxi for a living. I first arrived in Vietnam in the summer of 2000. As I began to learn the languages in the months that followed, my conversation partners were the tea ladies, market vendors, and motorcycle taxi drivers who were a part of my everyday. And on the possible starting point for a conversation, work, work were inevitably the most engaging. After all, we can't, how can we not have something to say about what they do for most of our working hours? As time went on, however, I came to understand that these exchanges were more than simply a means of passing the time or practicing my Vietnamese. Then provided a window on how people were living incredible processes of change at a particular moment in Vietnam's history. Yes, simultaneously reveal experiences and values that resonate across time and space to speak to all of us. For Vietnam, the end of the Second World War ushered in a long and devastating period of conflict that at different times in different places involved elements of anti-colonial struggle, social and economic revolution, civil war, ethnic strife, and Cold War geopolitics. Estimated vary, but somewhere between 2 and 3 million Vietnamese lost their lives in the Indonesia wars that followed. Today, the conflict lives on in the bodies and memories of the survivors, and in an environment scarred by the use of millions of tons of bombs, ordnance, and the toxic chemical defoliant. For most of the people we interviewed, the struggle are something they learned about through the media or in history textbooks, but for others they are much more real. Among the accounts that follow, an elderly calligrapher recalled his wartime career as an interpreter for Soviet technician. A Catholic statue craftsman remembered life remembers life on the collectivized farm and policy intended to eradicate substitute practice. A retired nurse struggles to describe the experience of arriving at the scene of an aerial bombing raid on April 30, 1975. The surrender of the U.S.-backed Republic of Vietnam and reunification of the country divided for more than 20 years brought only a tenuous and temporary kind of peace. Those labeled supporters of the former remade face lengthy term in harsh re-education camp, followed by exclusion from the centrally planned economy. Southern Vietnam's large ethnic Chinese community, long prominent in e-commerce and industry, first born firstborn embraced a policy that forcibly collectivized private property, then found themselves victims of rising tensions between Vietnam and its former ally, China. In December 1978, Vietnamese troops invaded Cambodia, topping Pol Pot and his brutal Khmer Rouge regime. The following February saw Chinese troops mount a short but destructive invasion across Vietnam's northern border, while the Chinese soon withdrew. Vietnamese troops would remain in Cambodia for another 11 years fighting and grinding guerrilla war against the remnant of the Khmer Rouge and their allies. With the ongoing war in Cambodia, the U.S.-led embargo crippling international trade and output from the collectivized farming system dropping. For many people, the years of peace that followed reunification in 1975 brought disappointment, hunger, fear, and a desperate struggle for survival. Hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese, like our moving service operator, fought in Cambodia or in the war with China. Over a million more chose to leave the country, braving government patrol, shark, storm, and pirate in what became known as the Boat People exodus. Today, we make up a large part of the more than 2.5 million Vietnamese living abroad. Their stories are also part of larger story of the nation, and thus the following pages include a number of interviews of overseas Vietnamese. By the early 1980s, the defects of the century paint economy has become impossible to ignore, and the series of reforms, driven as much by local realities as central directives, saw market elements slowly introduced into common economy. This process deepened and accelerated after the 1986 Party Congress, officially ushering in the đổi mới period of market-oriented socialism that continued to this day. For a short while, new economic freedom was accompanied by the flowering of political participation and criticism. But by 1989, even, even in Eastern Europe and China, has strengthened the position of those who saw in this political freedom and potential threat to the Communist Party monopoly on power. While the last decades have seen the party relax many of the formerly strict control over society, today Vietnam remains a single party state with an efficient and active security apparatus where those who engage in public form of dissent face harassment, arrest, and imprisonment. imprisonment. The economic reform after 1986 combined with increasing integration into the global marketplace for goods and services to transform Vietnam's economy and society. Not all the transformation has been easy. The 1990s saw thousands of inefficient state-owned enterprises (SOEs) restructured or closed, and hundreds of thousands of workers, like our flower seller, forced to find new, less stable forms of employment. The, depend, the dependence on production for exports and opened up new opportunities, but at the same time exposed farmers and workers directly to the vigors of the global marketplace. New foreign invest factory has created new jobs, but less participatory form of labor organization and uh, management has contributed to unrest visible in the thousands of strikes. Officially illegal but generally tolerated that have occurred since 2000. Nevertheless, the overall effect of these transformations has been bring real material benefit to the lives of ordinary Vietnamese. The gradual dismantling of the collective farm system and the introduction of private lands right after 1986 contribute to a rapid increase in agricultural production. After years of near famine, Vietnam was once again an exporter of rice by the late 1980s. The withdrawal of Vietnamese troops from Cambodia in 1989 was followed by the normalization of trade relations, first with Europe and then with the United States. This process of integration as accelerated still further in 2006 when Vietnam became a member of the World Trade Organization. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, real GDP growth hovered around 6% annually. Even more striking, according to government figures, was the way the same period saw the percentage of the population living in poverty drop from over 60% to less than 15%. By 2009, GDP per capita was over 1,001 and $100, and the World Bank had ranked Vietnam a lower middle income country, simply framing its status as a shining example of successful economic development.